philosophy which on one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance.
My fellow concerned Guyanese, I come to you today not as a politician, not as a bureaucrat, but like hundreds of thousands of other Guyanese in Guyana and around the world, I come in earnest as a concerned Guyanese whose navel string is buried in Guyana, as a Guyanese who shares a common heritage and culture which the years and the miles have not managed to erode or diminish. On February 23, 2011, our nation celebrated 41 years of being a cooperative republic. 5 years from now will mark 50 years of independence. And the question we ask now is the question we'll ask 5 years from now. What have we achieved as a nation, and how do we compare with our neighbors in the region? Where will we stand as a nation compared to 50 years ago? Today, 1/4 of the population of Guyana still lack clean sanitation facilities. Public spending on education has declined to 8.5% to 6.1%. The University of Guyana is underfunded. Once again, the government is embroiled in the infamous laptop scandal for which there has been no transparency or fairness, no tender, and no procurement process. In any case, the computers have not been purchased. That was only a price on an invoice. So what was the figure quoted by the minister? Well, yes, some computers have been purchased and received. Has there been tender for the computers? No, we did not tender, but we will do so in the near future, said the leader.
You hear lie? That is lie. You hear lie? King liar. Teach your pussy.
In addition, the Hansford reports, which are unique records of parliamentary debates, seem to have been destroyed. The World Health Organization credits Guyana as having the highest prevalence of AIDS in Latin America and the Caribbean, and is one of the poorest and most forlorn nations in the hemisphere, where ethnic division and racial politics and violence still rule the day. Over the past 45 years, the scourge of racial discrimination, ethnic division, and vitriolic racial politics have continued to plague our society and remain as pervasive and as prevalent as years gone by. The forces that divided our beloved nation are no longer the slave masters, no longer the plantation owners, no longer the colonialists. It is our own Guyanese elected officials who ignite the flames of ethnic division, instigate and propagate and perpetuate the ideology of divide and rule, the Appenjack philosophy. Both dominant parties have been instrumental in the socio-economic and political dispossession of Guyanese. The post-colonial leadership of Guyana has failed the Guyanese masses, and this must end. As Walter Rodney said decades ago, and it's even truer today, Guyana has become a land of horrors. The coastal strip of Guyana has become a hazardous terrain, said Rodney. And I say, if Guyanese were Yemenis or Tunisians, Egyptians or Libyans, our country would be embroiled in a revolution for democracy to depose a dictator and a repressive regime as seen in the Arab world today. For too long, Guyanese have sat in the cauldron of discontent and accepted the systemic political ineptness.
Do you know what it means to have a revolution? And what it takes to make a solution?
Our nation must break the shackles of the past and relinquish the bigotry and race-based politics which have been endemic in our political machinery for over half a century. The time is now, and we face the fierce urgency of now.
Heal the world, make it a better place.
we're reminded of the words of Kofi Annan, who said, "We may have different religions, different languages, different colored skin, but we belong to one human race." I believe, however, in the resilience and ingenuity of the Guyanese people to build a new nation and to look to the vision of a bright tomorrow with a dream of hope from which our nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its motto, one people, one nation, one destiny. But this can only be achieved through a change of regime, through good governance with bold 21st century visionary, innovative leadership, which we sadly lack today. Leadership which will inspire hope and ignite passion for a bright new dream for tomorrow. A clear dawn of hope as we look to a vision that will unite our nation on the path of prosperity and true cooperation. But first, we must rise above the walls that divide us. Race, religion, class, ethnicity, and develop a spirit of partnership and the capacity for transformational change to foster a cohesive, cooperative society of unity and mutual respect. Recently, one Guyanese political figure indicated that shared governance would be the solution to our racial divide. I believe that not to be so. Shared governance is necessary, and the reform of the Constitution from the Westminster system is critical. But it's only through massive, broad, sweeping reform and re-educating of our people could we start the healing process for national unity.
One love, one heart, let's get together and feel alright.
And so I call on the leaders of the ruling party, of the opposition party, community leaders, religious leaders, and activists to publicly denounce racism and designate 1 month of the year as a National Unity Month. And to the presidential candidates, they should take a page from the book of Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. On his European diplomatic tour, Barack Obama apologized for American foreign policy, stating that America had shown arrogance and been dismissive, even derisive towards its allies. On May 16, 1997, Bill Clinton apologized for the U.S. government's Tuskegee syphilis study. And so in order to start the healing process, both candidates should come together and publicly apologize to the victims of hate crimes and racial discrimination perpetuated over 50 years by both dominant political parties. The time has come to initiate the process of healing and break the shackles of the past. In a recent press conference in Chile, President Obama said that we must understand the history, but we must not be trapped by the past. And so we must develop a program for national unity in which history can be used as an instrument of social change to reduce ethnic tensions and racial hostility. And it must start with the youths, the next generation of leaders. The time has come for a new construct for cultural national solidarity, mutual respect, and reciprocal responsibility. And this can be accomplished through an all-inclusive program of cultural events which highlight the rich diversity of our heritage through cultural exchanges, drama, music, food, and educational forums nationwide. Through an initiative to invite Guyanese to return home to participate. But we must go even further by initiating the educational forums which share information on the history of the Guyanese working people and the origins of stereotyping as the need to dispel those beliefs and practices in a new political, social framework for national unity. A new educational curriculum is needed, started in primary schools, focusing on the roots of racial discrimination with methodologies and projects being developed to foster healing and racial tolerance at an early age. It comes as no surprise that race was effectively adopted by the planters of the 19th century and even by contemporary leaders as an effective strategy of control. 150 years later, Guyana remains one of the most ethnically divided nations in the region. This must change. Our leaders today still incite these conflicts and feed the flames of racial disharmony for their own political power and greed. We must chart a new course and commence a Head Start program to inform and educate the youths of Guyana. They must be taught that Indians and Africans met for the first time in a Caribbean setting, and that racist barbs originated from the stereotypes produced and imposed by the plantation owners. The lessons must be taught that Guyana was built on the backs of slaves and subsequently by indentured laborers after slavery ended. That it was the stupendous efforts of labor that made the land suitable for cultivation of cane and the maintenance of the polar system, done on the backs of the slaves, the ancestors of Afro-Guyanese. Slaves who moved over 100 million tons of heavy waterlogged clay with only shovels and their bare hands. History teaches us that the Indian women were made the sex targets of lawless white overseers, and that it is an historic fact that Indians who came as indentured laborers were being confined and beaten and treated as slaves. And during an inquiry into these reports, it was the Africans who gave evidence in favor of the Indians to conform these atrocities, which led to the prosecution and convictions of those responsible. It is a fact that Chinese who came to Guyana brought few women, and their attempts to get African women led to clashes. And after indentureship ended, East Indians were given free land or paid little or nothing for it, while Africans were forced to pay high prices for abandoned estates, which they bought and turned into villages. These were some of the forces of dissension and racial tensions created by the colonizers that form the root of our racial strife today, that is condoned, endorsed, and institutionalized by the current regime. The slave masters and plantation owners are long gone, but the mechanisms of racial tension, the politicized racial division, and the flames of dissension are still being fanned by both political parties. The candidates all preach party unity, and yet they forget that national unity should be the creed and platform upon which our nation will move forward, since we lack the human resources and the human capital necessary to do so for change we can embrace. And in the words of Martin Carter, like a root stopped by a stone, you turn back questioning the tree you feed. But what the leaves hear is not what the roots asked. And so we look to the new dawning of reduced ethnic tensions and racial violence, the elimination of discrimination against women and the eradication of racial intolerance. We look to that day when all Guyanese children, Indians, African, Portuguese, and Amerindians can truly live out the true meaning of our motto: one people, one nation, one destiny. Edmund Burke said it best: when you're finally up on the moon looking back at Earth, all these differences and nationalistic traits are pretty well going to blend. And you're going to get the concept that maybe this is really one world. And why the hell can't we learn to live like decent people? For change we can embrace.
So wonderful, you will hold a special place.